I am Olivia Anderson, 28 years old, the middle daughter in a family my mother has always proudly called the ideal model to our relatives, neighbors, everyone except me. If you asked me what I remember most in life, it would have to be last year's family reunion, the one where every eye in the room was fixed on me, but not out of pride. I was the only one singled out as the disappointment. The room was filled with laughter and chatter, my siblings excitedly sharing stories about their big careers, impressive achievements, and lavish trips. Each detail something my mother boasted about to every person present. As for me, I sat quietly in a corner of the table, wondering if anyone even remembered the silent efforts and sacrifices I once thought were just a daughter's duty. When my mother stood up in the middle of the dinner, her voice rang out, crisp and unmistakable. "I'm proud of all my children, except the failure sitting right there." The whole table seemed to hold its breath before erupting in mocking laughter. Not a single person dared meet my eyes, not even my father. I felt like a stranger, invisible, as if all my years of effort had never existed. I didn't cry. Instead, I calmly stood up, took a folded paper from my pocket, and placed it in front of my mother. "For you, Mom. Happy Mother's Day." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving behind stunned faces and looks of disbelief. Have you ever been hurt so deeply by your own family that you simply can't forget? If you've ever been through that, please share your story below. I truly want to hear from you. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest where everyone knows your name, and the stories of each family are always the main topic at church, the supermarket, or any little cafe in town. On the surface, my family was the perfect reflection of all the traditional values our community admired. 4 siblings, my dad a manager at the local bank, my mom a well-known strict and by-the-book middle school teacher. Every summer brought picnics and perfectly framed family photos hanging in our living room. And never without my mother's constant reminder, our family must make the Anderson name shine. Even as a child, I knew my mother was the real power in our house. She decided everything, from what we had for dinner, to the color of the curtains, down to what each of us would study, which sports we played, and who was allowed to come over. My father, although he earned the money and was respected in the community, always faded into the background whenever my mother spoke. He was gentle, patient, often giving me a sympathetic look whenever my mother scolded me. But he never truly stood up for me when she was angry. For my siblings, Alex, Lauren, and Emily, things were so much easier. Alex, the eldest, was Mom's pride after winning a full scholarship to a prestigious university. Lauren, beautiful and confident, was a high school beauty queen. And Emily, the youngest, was clever and quick-witted, always winning Mom over with her grades and sweet words. It was different. From a young age, I liked sitting alone reading books, preferred drawing to running around outside, dreaded crowded parties, and always felt out of place, even in my own family. My mother once told the whole extended family right to my face, "This girl is too introverted. I worry she'll never amount to anything." I can't count how many times she compared me to Lauren. My sister only had to smile and everyone was delighted, while I had to work twice as hard just to earn a single compliment. On holidays, when everyone was planning parties or vacations, I was often forgotten or handed little chores like cleaning up, washing dishes, or taking pictures, never once the center of any activity. The most painful memory was my 16th birthday. My mother threw a huge party for Lauren but forgot that my own birthday was just a week later. She said, "A good daughter knows how to be considerate. Your sister has more friends, so we'll just do one party for both of you to save money." Maybe what hurt me most wasn't the favoritism itself, but the feeling that I always had to struggle just to exist in a family where love was handed out as a reward for achievements. In our house, everything had to be perfect, from grades and sports trophies to the way we spoke to adults. If you weren't outstanding, you were seen as a burden. I remember the times my mother would remind us, "No one in this family is allowed to be looked down on. We can't let other people's kids outshine us." In those moments, I felt like I was running in a race where no one ever gives a prize to the runner-up. Each time I failed, every time I didn't meet her expectations, I'd hear her cold words. "What have you done for this family besides making me worry more?" My father sometimes tried to comfort me, gently placing his hand on my shoulder and quietly saying, "Just be yourself, Olivia." But I knew that as soon as my mother appeared, any encouragement would vanish into thin air. Each member of my family had a role to play, and mine was the misfit, always under scrutiny, easily sacrificed whenever the family needed someone to take the blame or serve as a bad example to my siblings. Once, I won third place in a statewide art contest and excitedly brought the trophy home to show my mom, but she just frowned and asked, "How many kids competed? Why didn't you get first?" That letdown, as small as it seemed, kept happening again and again, accumulating into a nameless pain every time I looked at our family photos, where I was always on the edge or overshadowed by my more prominent siblings. As I grew up, I started to realize there were gaps in my heart that no amount of effort could fill. I chose to study art, the only major in the family considered a waste of time, fiercely opposed by my mother, but my father quietly signed the enrollment papers because he knew it was my dream. The day I got my acceptance letter, the whole family was silent. Only my mother smiled coldly and said, "Go ahead and try, but don't come running to me for money." I understood that in her eyes, everything I did was just another failed experiment, a reason for her to prove she was right not to trust me. And so I grew up in a family obsessed with achievements, where my existence was only tolerated as long as I didn't embarrass anyone. And maybe that's why I always carried the feeling of being surplus, never truly belonging in the place I called home. From the day I set foot in art school, my life felt like it split off from the safe circle of my family. For the first time, I rented a tiny room on the outskirts of the city, balancing school with every job I could find, making coffee, selling used books, tutoring local kids in paintings. The little savings I had and my father's quiet support were barely enough, but I had never felt so free and light. Away from home, I began to see how vast and diverse the world was. So many people didn't care about the Anderson name. No one forced me to become anyone's perfect copy. There I could be myself, respected for my skills, ideas, and differences. Things I once thought were flaws, shaped by years under the old roof. But no matter what, I never stopped yearning for the day I could prove to my mother that my choices weren't a mistake, that I was just as worthy of pride as my siblings. Every holiday I still tried to come home, always bringing small gifts I made myself, a watercolor portrait of my mom, a hand-designed birthday card for my dad. I always hoped that, just once, if my mother could smile and acknowledge me, all my old wounds would finally heal. But each time I crossed the threshold, the same old feeling rushed back, her cold gaze, small talk as a formality, and always ending with some comparison to Alex or Lauren, who by then had thriving careers, ideal partners, the pride my mother loved to brag about at every family gathering. Some summers, I stayed in the city working extra jobs, saving enough to buy my mom a beautiful silk scarf, or send my dad a fine tea set. But every gift was simply placed on a shelf, never mentioned again. Sometimes, she'd gently say, "Don't waste your money next time. I don't need these things. Save it for yourself." There were times I thought maybe all my efforts were meaningless, but every time I looked back, I still believed that if I just tried a bit harder, maybe one day I could do something my mother would finally be proud to show off to the whole neighborhood. The tension became even clearer as I started achieving small milestones. One of my paintings was selected for exhibition at a local museum. A few friends bought my artwork for their living rooms, and I picked up more art classes for kids at a community center. I called home, eager to share the news, hoping for even a little encouragement. But all I got was my mother's indifferent voice. "Call it a success when you can earn enough to support yourself." Lauren just laughed mockingly. "You're still only painting for little kids? What's there to brag about?" And Alex didn't even bother replying. He was too busy with a big project at work, always too busy for trivial stuff like that. It didn't stop there. Every time I tried to offer help with family matters, like suggesting we fix up the old house, proposing ideas for organizing a party for my grandparents, or simply wanting to help cook a family dinner, my mother would always brush me off. She'd say, "Let your siblings handle it. You just focus on yourself. Don't make things more complicated." The more I wanted to be closer, the more I felt myself being pushed away. Every time that happened, I remembered what my mother said when I was little. "This house only has room for those who know how to strive. If not, you're on your own." The hurt kept building up, growing into a sense of isolation right in the very place I once called home. Despite everything, I still tried to prove that I could make something of myself. I signed up for a major national art contest, creating everything on my own, coming up with the concepts, even finding small sponsorships from like-minded friends. It was the first time I felt truly strong, independent, and living out my dreams. In the final days leading up to the competition, I worked myself to exhaustion, and there were moments when I nearly gave up, sometimes just because of a single message from my mom. "If you fail, don't bring shame to this family." Those words felt like a cold knife, but they also pushed me to become even tougher. I won third prize. The award wasn't huge, but it was enough for me to buy myself a used car, the very first thing I'd ever been able to give myself. The day I drove that car home, planning to invite my family on a picnic, my mom only glanced at it through the window and said, "If it's an old car, just use it. Don't show it off or people will laugh." That stung more than failure, like no matter how hard I tried, I would always be nothing more than a faded shadow, never worthy of anyone's pride. That was when I promised myself I'd never live to please anyone else again. I wouldn't let anyone's judgments hold back my unfinished dreams. Quietly, I started making plans, saving every penny, preparing the biggest gift I'd ever given, something I hoped would change everything so that maybe, for the first time, my mother could proudly tell the relatives, "My daughter is successful too." I didn't know if it would make her smile or just disappoint her more, but I knew I couldn't stop hoping. I couldn't stop wanting to be myself, even if only once in my life. As that summer approached, I poured everything I had into organizing a Mother's Day celebration that would also be a rare family reunion. After years of always being on the sidelines of family events, for the first time, I wanted to create something on my own, something truly meaningful, that would make my mother proud in front of everyone. I quietly saved for nearly a year, took on extra projects, sold paintings, cut every personal expense so I could prepare the ultimate gift, a brand new luxury car, something my mother had mentioned as a dream for years, but no one in the family had ever been able to fulfill. I even asked my closest friend to design a beautiful letter, inside which were the papers transferring the car into my mother's name. Every bit of paperwork complete, just waiting for that moment at the party. That morning, I woke up early, checking every detail one last time. Looking at the shiny new car in the first light of day, I imagined how radiant my mother's face would be, how surely she would proudly say to everyone, "The daughter everyone thought was useless has achieved something remarkable." I silently prayed, just this once, let her hug me and say something gentle like she always did for Lauren, Emily, or Alex whenever they succeeded. But all those tiny hopes shattered in the very moment my mother stood up in the middle of the party. From the moment I walked into the restaurant, I sensed something was off. Everyone was laughing and chatting, showering Lauren with praise for winning a major award at work, congratulating Alex for his recent promotion, and celebrating Emily, who was about to study abroad. My mother, striking in a new dress and with her sharp, icy gaze, kept boasting about her children's achievements. Every child except me. I carried my little gift box, the letter I'd prepared, intending to find the perfect moment to give it to her, but it seemed no one even noticed I was there. Even when I greeted her, she barely glanced at me and said, "You're here? Just sit at the end of the table, I'm busy talking to guests." Dinner began, everyone raising their glasses to celebrate my mother, then turning back to talk about my siblings' bright futures. I sat quietly, choking down spoonfuls of soup, my heart pounding not with excitement, but with a sinking feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Midway through the meal, my mother suddenly stood up and asked for silence so she could say a few words. I waited, hands clutching the little gift box tightly, ready for the moment I thought I'd remember forever. But instead of thanking me, my mother looked around the room, let her gaze settle on me, and bluntly said, "I am so proud of all my children. They're all outstanding, talented, and make me proud every time I talk about them. Except for the failure sitting right there. I truly regret that I can't tell my friends I have 4 successful children." The room froze for a second, then burst into mocking laughter from some relatives, with satisfied looks and whispered comments like, "She's right, you know." No one spoke up for me. My father sat with his head bowed, my siblings all looked away. In that moment, it felt like the whole world turned its back on me. I can't remember how long it took me to gather myself and stand up. My chest was exploding with emotions, shame, pain, anger, and a strange sense of calm. Quietly, I walked over to my mother, set the gift box and letter down on the table as every eye in the room stared in shock. My voice was steady but clear. "For you, Mom. Happy Mother's Day." Then I took the car keys from my pocket and placed them next to the gift. No explanations, no more expectations. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, ignoring the murmurs behind me and my sister's calls after me. As I pushed open the door, a cold gust of wind swept through, but I felt lighter than I ever had. I stood looking at the brand new car that, just minutes ago, had been a symbol of hope and reconciliation. I knew what had just happened wasn't just another public humiliation. It was the final confirmation that in this family, I would always be on the outside. A few minutes later, I heard my mother's piercing scream from inside as she opened the letter and realized everything she'd just lost, not just the gift, but also the last bit of faith I had in family love. That was the moment I knew it was truly over. I left the restaurant that day feeling empty, not even bothering to wipe away my tears or look back. The streets were still busy, golden sunlight stretching across the road, but for me, everything felt drowned in darkness. I drove aimlessly, just wanting to get as far away as possible from the laughter, the pitying glances, and especially my mother's words, echoing like a knife in my mind. Except for the failure sitting right there. Every time I remembered it, I felt drained of all strength, unable to tell the difference between anger, despair, and self-hatred. The first night after the party, I sat alone for hours in the tiny rented room on the city's edge, just staring at the gift box that was supposed to be for my mother, but now was just evidence of my own foolishness. Every word of encouragement I'd ever heard suddenly felt meaningless. Even my father's occasional gentle looks couldn't ease my loneliness. I tormented myself, wondering where I'd gone wrong, why, even after trying my hardest, I was still nothing more than a shadow, never once acknowledged or included in that circle of love my siblings enjoyed. In the days that followed, I didn't want to leave the house. I turned off my phone, cut all contact with my family, didn't reply to Lauren's perfunctory check-ins, and certainly didn't read the vague reproaches from relatives on social media. I fell into a state only those who have been rejected by their own family can understand, as if I had been exiled from the home I spent my entire youth hoping to belong to. Every morning, I had no reason to get out of bed, half-finished paintings piled up on my desk, but not a single brushstroke could save me from the abyss of emptiness. I began to question my own worth. Was a daughter with no major achievements, not enough to make her mother proud, still deserving of love? I remembered every little detail, those forgotten birthdays, gifts no one ever opened, all those nights lying awake, listening to my mother talk about my siblings' successes without ever mentioning me. Every old scratch became a deep fracture, making me feel like nothing more than an extra in my own family. The more I looked back, the more I grew to resent trying so hard just for approval. It's ironic. I grew up believing that if I just sacrificed, if I was kind and tried my best, then one day I would be accepted. But the truth is, in some families, love is something you only get if you're good enough. There were nights I cried uncontrollably, weeping because I felt so lost in this crowded city, because the memory of that party replayed in my head like a broken film reel. I once told myself that if I just tried a little longer, if I was patient enough, my mother would finally see I wasn't useless. But now, that faith was shattered. I no longer hoped for a miracle, no longer dreamed of reconciliation or those half-hearted hugs during the holidays. The only thing left was a single resolution. It was time to save myself. After a week of living like a shadow, I decided to pack up everything and move out of the rented apartment near my mother's house, heading for a strange city where I wouldn't have to see a single familiar face. I changed my phone number, deleted my old social media accounts, and started over from zero, even though I knew it wouldn't be easy for someone as fragile as me. On the day I left a short note on my desk for my mother. "Thank you for teaching me how to stand up without anyone's hand to hold." It was the first time I'd ever said anything to her without hoping for a reply. In those early days in the new city, I didn't make art anymore. I couldn't even bring myself to paint a single picture just for me. I took a job as a waitress in a small cafe, earning enough for rent, learning to get used to strange faces and evenings spent alone within four walls. The loneliness lingered, but at least it no longer mixed with the fear of being compared, judged, or facing my mother's cold gaze. I slowly learned to walk by myself, cook for myself, hold myself close for comfort, and stopped begging anyone for affection. Sometimes I wanted to pick up the phone and call my dad, to tell him I was okay, that I missed the family, that I never meant to disappoint Mom. But I knew, no matter how much he loved me, he couldn't change the truth. I'd been cast out of that circle of love a long time ago. Instead of clinging to painful memories, I chose to start a new journey. Even if I had no idea where the future would take me, I knew this time I didn't need anyone's permission to live as myself. During those first months in the new city, I still moved through life quietly and timidly. The city was vast and crowded. Nobody knew my name. Nobody cared that I was once the shadow in the Anderson family. Every morning, I'd wake up in my tiny rented room, make my own cup of coffee, decide for myself what to wear, what to eat, where to go, without anyone judging or forcing me to act like a proper Anderson. At first, that freedom felt both liberating and lonely. I can still remember those nights standing by the window, staring out at the city lights, wondering if I truly deserved this new life, or if, in the end, I was just a failure running away from the only place I'd ever called home. Gradually, I began to realize that in this bustling city, I could start everything over again. There was no more pressure to achieve, no more scrutinizing glances. I dared to try small things I'd never been brave enough to attempt before. I took a simple weekend baking class, made friends with others who had also moved here to escape heavy pasts. Some afternoons, we'd sit together in the park, sharing stories of failure, pain, and unformed dreams. For the first time, I felt real empathy. No need to be better than anyone, and no one made me feel I had to deserve love. Those new friends taught me how to slow down, how to appreciate simple things like the afternoon sun or the smell of fresh bread in a tiny kitchen. I also met Maria, the owner of the cafe where I worked, who encouraged me to return to painting. She never asked what awards I'd won or cared about my grades or my past. She just said, "If you love painting, then paint. No one has the right to take that from you." With her gentle encouragement, I began painting again. At first just a few small pictures to hang in the cafe. Then later, I accepted a job to paint a mural for a local preschool. Gradually, customers started to ask about my art. I began to earn more, enough to confidently rent a small, sunlit apartment for myself. Time went by and I got used to living independently, a life where I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. Once, I invited a few close friends to my home, cooked for them myself, told funny stories, put on music and danced as if I'd never been held back by anyone's expectations. Seeing my friends laugh, I realized I was no longer the girl quietly hiding on the edge of the family dinner table. Here I could be myself. I could be weak or strong. I could fail and still be valued. Confidence returned. I took on more mural projects, even joined a charity group teaching free art classes to underprivileged kids in the city. The achievements were small, but enough to make me feel proud of myself, not because someone in my family recognized me, but because for the first time, I dared to live true to my feelings and dreams. My new friends respected me for who I truly was, not for the Anderson family label. Sometimes, when I caught the bright eyes of a child in my art class after they finished a painting, I saw myself as a little girl again. Only this time, no one could take that joy away from me. Occasionally, my mother still sent brief messages, sometimes asking about my health, sometimes just reproaching me for missing important family occasions. I didn't reply right away, and it didn't hurt like it used to. I learned to set clear boundaries, to understand that coming home should only be for a place where I was truly accepted. Every now and then my father would call, his voice heavy with sadness. I'd gently answer, "I'm okay, Dad. This time, I really am." I was no longer the daughter who needed validation from applause or reluctant hugs. True maturity came from the days I had to pull myself up in the darkness, to allow myself to fail, and to give myself the chance to stand up again. I realized that if I didn't love myself, didn't define my own worth, No matter how hard I tried, I'd never satisfy anyone else. The past is still there, and the wounds still ache, but now I know how to bandage them, how to comfort myself I did it, even if no one else ever sees. Perhaps the greatest turning point in my life wasn't how many more achievements I racked up, but the sense of freedom and peace I felt every morning when I woke up. No one else had control over my emotions or my future, only I did. It was something I had never dared to imagine in a lifetime spent in my family's shadow. It was only when I thought I was truly free that I'd finally shaken off the darkness of the past, that my mother unexpectedly reappeared in my life, not as a caring mother, but as a woman full of calculation, driven by necessity. It all began with a strange phone call on a Saturday night, just as I was finishing a mural for the preschool near my home. My mother's voice came through the phone, no longer sharp or proud as before, but with an urgent, almost pleading tone. "Olivia, I want to see you. Our family. There's something going on." At first I was confused, unsure whether to feel happy or worried. It had been so long since I'd heard my mother's voice outside of her terse, reproachful texts. Part of me still hoped that after everything, my mother would finally see my true worth, that she'd want to mend things, that even a simple apology would be enough for me to let go of all the resentment. But when I agreed to meet at a small cafe on the south side of the city, that thin hope quickly faded. My mother showed up with Lauren and Alex. Their faces were tense, but their urgency couldn't mask the calculating look in my mother's eyes, as if she was already scripting another plan and I was just her final pawn. After a few awkward pleasantries, my mother began explaining the family's troubles. How Dad had just lost his job, Lauren was facing major debt from a failed investment, and Alex had been demoted because of a scandal at his company. She didn't mention Emily, only saying briefly, "Your sister's fine," before moving straight to asking me to contribute a large sum of money to help the family out of their predicament. "You're the only one who's stable now. I know you can help," she said, her eyes glinting with calculation. "Blood is blood. Surely you wouldn't turn your back on your family when we're in crisis." Her words were like a knife slicing through the last shred of hope I had left. I looked at each member of my family, faces I had once loved, whose approval I'd once desperately craved, and now all of them were staring at me with expectation. No one mentioned my old wounds. No one asked how I'd survived during my darkest days. Not a single word of apology for that dinner, or for the years I was cast aside. Everything came down to obligation, to sacrifice for the family, as if, all these years, I'd always been just a backup, only remembered when they needed someone to save them. I tried to keep my voice steady, asking my mother gently, "Have you ever truly been proud of me? Have you ever told anyone I was a successful daughter?" The question made the whole table fall silent. My mother avoided my gaze, forcing a smile. "Don't think negatively. I always want the best for you kids. Now that the family's in trouble, surely you'll help." Alex jumped in, irritated. "You're making too big a deal out of this. Why keep score with your own family?" I stayed silent, feeling more clearly than ever. To them, I only had value when I could give money, effort, even my youth and dignity. I glanced at Lauren and saw her head bowed, unable to meet my eyes, as if she was afraid to admit the family's selfishness and lack of empathy. As for my mother, even as she tried to appear gentle, I saw that she felt no regret at all, just the impatience of someone who had run out of other options. I wasn't angry, nor did I feel the old pain anymore. Instead, I felt lighter inside, as if I had finally cut out a tumor that had been growing in my soul for far too long. Now, I was clear-headed enough to understand that, even if my mother or my siblings spoke words of love, my value to them would always be tied to what I could provide for the family. That realization was both bitter and liberating. It helped me see that I was no longer the little girl who would forgive any hurt just for a moment of recognition. That meeting ended in silence. I gently declined all of their requests, simply saying I would think about it, then left the cafe under my mother's disappointed and somewhat angry gaze. As I turned away, my mother called after me, "Olivia, you're the only one I trust right now." I didn't respond. I just walked away, feeling not a single ripple of resentment, only a strange peace, as if I'd finally closed a door with no way back. That night, I lay on my bed, watching the pale yellow light dance on the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. Maybe this meeting would be the last time I expected anything from my mother and family. From now on, I would live my own life, a life built from scars and the determination to rise up at the end. The next morning, I received a message from my mother. "Come home for a bit, I want to talk clearly." Reading those words, I suddenly felt like I was standing at the threshold of everything that had ever hurt me. But this time, I wasn't afraid, and I wasn't running away. I knew it was time to finally speak the whole truth, to hide nothing, not to shrink my feelings just to receive some half-hearted affection. I told myself, if I didn't speak now, the past would hold me captive forever. So I returned to the old house, the place I had called home out of habit, for years, not out of any sense of safety. The kitchen was just as I remembered, clean and perfect, like always. My mother was already at the table with her favorite tea set and an impatient, expectant look. She spoke first, her voice full of reproach and pressure. "Olivia, I've sacrificed my whole life for you kids, and now it's time for you to fulfill your duty to the family. I don't like talking about money, but if you truly love me, help our family get through this hardship." I looked deeply into her eyes and saw that same old certainty, as if she were always right, as if the world owed her unquestioning obedience. I quietly took a deep breath, deciding I wouldn't avoid this anymore. "Mom, today I want to say everything, from the very beginning, everything I've had to endure." I spoke slowly, my voice no longer trembling. "Do you remember all the times you threw joint birthday parties for Lauren and forgot about mine? Do you remember when I won 3rd place in the statewide art contest and all you asked was why? I didn't get first. Have you ever actually seen me? Not just my mistakes, my weaknesses, or the times I failed to meet your expectations." The air felt thick with tension. My mother looked at me, uneasy, then forced a smile. "I just wanted the best for you. In life, no one loves the weak. I just wanted you to be strong." I shook my head, my voice still calmed. "But Mom, being strong doesn't mean being abandoned. Doesn't mean living with wounds that never healed. For years I did everything I could to make you proud. I beg you to see me the way you saw Lauren, Alex, and Emily. What I got in return was only coldness, constant comparisons, and finally, a public humiliation at a family dinner. That's not love. That's a race where I'm the only one crossing the finish line in a desert." My mother started to cry. Those tears used to soften my heart, used to make me apologize even when I'd done nothing wrong. But this time, I looked at her, calm and clearer than I had ever been. "For Mom, tears won't change anything." I waited for an apology, for a genuine hug, but I never got one. Today, I don't blame you anymore, and I'm done trying to change you. I just want to say, from now on, my life will be decided by me. I don't owe you anything, and you no longer have the right to demand I live for someone else's dreams," she sobbed. "But Olivia, family is the most important thing. Everything I did was just to make sure you kids became useful people. How can you be so cold?" I smiled gently, feeling a lightness as, for the first time, I no longer felt guilty. Family is supposed to be a place to come home to, a place where everyone is accepted whether they succeed or fail. If you've never understood that, I can't force you, but I have the right to create my own family. A place where no one is ashamed of their past, where no one is left behind. I pulled a check from my pocket and placed it on the table, the amount just enough to help my family get through this rough patch. I spoke slowly. "This is all I can do, as someone who was once part of this family. But it's not an obligation. After today, Mom, please live however you wish, and I'll live as I deserve to." I'm no longer the girl standing on the edge of the table waiting for a nod or a look of pity. Stood up, calmly reclaiming the keys to the luxury car I had once given her, quietly retrieving the transfer papers that no one had managed to sign. My mother grabbed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "You'll regret this. One day you'll need your mother." I gently released her hand. "I don't hate you, and I don't resent you. I just want to live my own life." The air in that familiar kitchen felt suddenly foreign, every memory replaying like a slow-motion film. I looked at my mother one last time, feeling grateful that it was those very wounds that had taught me to love myself and to never again mistake real affection for control disguised as sacrifice. I left quietly. No tears, no more blame. Stepping through that door, I knew I was leaving the past on the table, keeping only the part of life that truly belonged to me. A year has passed since I left that old house. At first, everything felt like a bittersweet dream. Some mornings, I would wake up still thinking I was trapped in a nightmare, being called a failure again, having to defend my own worth before a merciless family tribunal. But then, as the first sunlight crept through the window of my little apartment, as the birds called to each other outside my balcony and stirred the thin curtains, I finally believed I had freed myself from the darkness of the past. No one watching my every move anymore, no more cold reminders. I began a new journey, one where I lived for myself and no longer feared anyone's gaze. I did more time to myself, to the simple things that once were dismissed as a waste of time. Making a good cup of tea, painting for hours with no purpose, rereading old books I used to hide under my pillow for fear my mother would call them useless. I reconnected with friends, the ones who had silently cheered me on from afar, even if they never said it aloud. A small group of friends with artistic souls became my second family. A place where no one was compared or judged, where everyone was free to become the best version of themselves. New life wasn't always easy. I had to learn to manage my finances, to take care of myself when I was sick, and even how to face loneliness during the holidays when everyone around me was going home to their families. More than once, I felt my heart sink as I happened to scroll past photos of the Anderson family on social media. They were still smiling, still throwing parties, and my name was never mentioned anymore. Strangely, instead of feeling left out, I actually felt relieved. I realized that people could still be happy without me there, and that it was only by leaving those old expectations behind that I could truly grow up. Gradually, I began to achieve small but deeply meaningful things. My paintings were invited to be shown at a local gallery, and I started teaching art classes to children who had gone through what I had. Kids who needed more than art, the belief that they deserved to be loved. One little girl once asked me, "Miss Olivia, if my family doesn't love me, can I make a new family for myself?" I hugged her and whispered, "Of course you can. Sometimes the family you choose for yourself is the one that heals you the most." One autumn day, I got a call from my father. He didn't say much, just softly told me, "Honey, I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to protect you when you needed me." His words felt like the final drop of warmth, soothing every wound in my heart. I forgave him, and I forgave myself, for having been weak, for wasting so many tears on people who were never willing to change. From then on, I felt as if I had finally untied the invisible rope that had bound me for most of my youth. Looking back, I understand now that all the scratches, the times I was forgotten, humiliated, or pushed aside, weren't signs of failure. They were lessons that taught me how to get up again, how to love myself unconditionally. I am grateful for that journey because it made me stronger than anyone I used to know. Now, I no longer need recognition from my mother, my relatives, or any small community obsessed with impossible standards. All I need is peace in my heart, the quiet pride of walking my own path. If you've ever been deeply hurt by those closest to you, if you've ever been cast out from the place you called home, I want you to know you are not alone. Your value doesn't lie in anyone's eyes, not in your achievements, not in empty handshakes or superficial praise. Your value lies in you, in your willingness to stand up, to set boundaries, to say enough to those who don't deserve a place in your life. Real family is where you get to be yourself. And if you have to create that place for yourself, be brave enough to do it. Every step you take is worthy of respect. Every hurt is a seed of new courage. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If you've ever gone through something similar, please share your story in the comments. Because when we share, we're no longer alone. Who knows, you might even find a new family, one warmer and fairer than you ever imagined. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing isn't forgiving others, it's forgiving yourself and choosing the happiness you truly deserve.